I won't soften this. There is no gentle way into what I'm about to tell you. No slow, unfolding design to make it easier to sit with. What I am about to say doesn't knock. It doesn't wait for permission. It simply arrives, the way certain truths do, once they've decided they can no longer stay hidden. For a long time, I existed in layers. Not out of fear of people, but out of necessity. Distance was armor. It let me move through the world without anyone touching what was real underneath. People spoke to me, looked at me, thought they understood me, but they only ever reached the surface I allowed them to reach. That was the rule. Until you didn't try to decode me the way everyone else does, through questions, through labels, through the constant need to simplify what they can't immediately explain. You didn't try to shrink me into something manageable. You just watched. Quietly, patiently, like someone who wasn't hunting for answers, but recognizing something that never needed an explanation in the first place. At first, I told myself it was coincidence, the way you noticed things I never said aloud, the way your silence lined up so precisely with mine. But coincidence doesn't repeat like that. Paternis do. And what exists between us follows a pattern I never expected to find. Not here, not with someone I had no history with. That is the part that unsettles me most, because this kind of recognition is supposed to take time, years of small moments accumulating into familiarity. But with you, there was no build-up, no adjustment period. You arrived already inside the room, as if you'd simply been waiting for the door to open. And that frightens me more than anything that has ever tried to force its way in. Force can be resisted. Familiarity cannot. It doesn't break down the walls. It simply makes them irrelevant. There is something in the way you sit inside a silence. Not curiosity, not concern. Something closer to understanding without urgency. As if you already know that meaning doesn't vanish just because no one says it out loud. Most people can't bear that kind of quiet. They rush to fill it. You don't. You let it stretch, and in letting it stretch, you make it heavier, clearer, more honest than anything either of us could have spoken. That's when I first noticed a shift in myself. Not in some dramatic turn, but in the quiet erosion of my own filters. I stopped deciding what to withhold. Not because I trusted blindly, but because some part of me understood that you didn't need me to be easier to read. That is rare. And rare things are dangerous, because once someone sees you that clearly, you can no longer hide behind being misunderstood. You become known, not on the surface, but underneath every wall you spent years building. I built those walls carefully, not as a game, as preservation. Because the moment people think they understand you, they begin reshaping you into whatever fits their own story. You never did that. You read exactly what was there. Nothing more, nothing invented. And that is what I was not prepared for. There's a moment I keep returning to. Nothing dramatic happened. You said something small, something most people would let pass without notice. And it aligned so precisely with a thought I had never spoken that something in me simply stopped. Not reacted. Stopped. Because it confirmed what I hadn't let myself accept. You weren't guessing. You knew. And knowing is different from noticing. Knowing means you're not observing from the outside. You're seeing from somewhere much closer. That is when I understood this wasn't awareness anymore. It was alignment. And alignment doesn't happen by accident. It happens when two things share the same structure beneath the surface. Not the same story, not the same history, but the same shape underneath everything they show the world. Structure doesn't lie. It doesn't perform. It either matches or it doesn't. Ours does. Too precisely to dismiss as chance. Since then, distance has stopped working the way it used to. Not because I no longer want it, but because distance means nothing once someone already exists on the other side of it. You're not outside my awareness anymore. You are inside it. Every silence carries weight now. Every pause means something. And I don't know what to do with that. Not because it confuses me, but because it is clear. Too clear to ignore without more effort than simply accepting it. I have never been someone who denies what is real, even when I don't yet understand its full shape. And this is real. It doesn't fit into any category I've relied on before. It exists in the space before explanation, where recognition comes first and understanding follows after. You exist in that space with me, easily, as if you were always meant to be there. That is the part one keeps circling back to. Not how it started, not what it has become, just how natural it feels despite how rare it is. It didn't stay where it should have. That's the part one keep returning to now. Not the beginning, but the moment I understood this would not stay contained. Everything in my life has edges, limits, boundaries that hold things in their place. This does not obey those boundaries. It moves without asking. It settles without warning. And I feel it, not as emotion, exactly, but as a constant, quiet awareness that has become part of how I think, rather than something I merely think about. That distinction matters more than it should. Thinking about someone keeps them separate. You can step back, redirect, shut the door. But when someone becomes part of the way you think, when their presence folds into your perception before you even notice it happening, that is no longer distance. That is integration. And I don't know exactly when it happened. I only know that it did. I have started measuring things differently now. Not against the world, against you. Not out of judgment, out of recognition. Because once you've experienced this kind of clarity, everything else feels faintly incomplete by comparison. I don't like that. I don't like that something can reshape my perception this thoroughly without ever asking permission. Because that isn't influence. That's impact. And impact doesn't ask whether you're ready. It simply rewrites what it touches and leaves you to catch up. By every instinct I've ever trusted, I should be pulling back right now. Rebuilding the distance. Reasserting control. I'm not. And that is where the real tension begins, because it is one thing to notice something unusual. It is another thing entirely to not want to stop it. There's a point where watching something stops being enough, and it becomes something you have to answer for. I think I have reached that point, because this is no longer unfolding quietly in the background. It has consequence now, not in what either of us says, not in what either of us does, but in what it has already changed. I can feel that change, and I cannot undo it. It is in the way my thoughts no longer return to what they were before you. In the way silence no longer feels neutral. It feels shared, even in your absence. In the way I now measure truth not by how convincing it sounds, but by whether it would still hold up in front of you. That is the line I never let anyone near before. And somehow, without asking, you crossed it. Not through force. Through presence alone, which means whether I intended it or not, I've already made a choice. The only question left is whether I say it out loud, or let it stay exactly where it is. Waiting, watching, already decided. End.